Darren, the lunchtime kickoff on Saturday, we've got the bottom-placed Aussie team against the top-placed Aussie team, the Force versus the Waratahs, and then at 3 o'clock, the Lions against the Highlanders. What do you think the Lions are going to do this week?
Yeah, that Lions-Highlanders game, it promises to be a fantastic game of rugby. You got the high-flying Highlanders in South Africa, first match of their tour, fantastic backline players, big, strong runners. It's worth admission fee just seeing them play. Against the Lions team, they're obviously flying high, still within a shout of topping the South African Conference, making the playoffs that way.
See, they got Marnitz Boshoff at 10 this week. And when he first came on the scene, that was really turned heads.
I was going to say, a couple of seasons ago, he would have been the first choice. Elton Young, he's given him credit. He's played some really good rugby this season, and he's sort of surpassed Marnitz Boshoff as the number one fly-off at the Lions. You've seen Boshoff play fullback a couple of times, but he's getting a chance at number 10. He's well known for his drop goals, and he attempts at least 2 or 3 every match. So it should be a fantastic game. I hope both teams give the ball air, run it. Nice to have a nice 3 o'clock kickoff, which is a little bit earlier than these 5 and 7 o'clock games. So tough game to call. Honestly, I think Rob and I were chatting earlier. Who do you give the advantage to in that game? I think it's obviously going to be a dry game, running rugby, which will favour the Highlanders. Their first game, if they're over the jet lag, that might play into their hands. I love the Highlanders. I really do. I will happily turn on the TV to watch them play. I've got a funny feeling they're going to be a little bit too strong for the Lions, especially if it gets open and the ball's thrown around with gay abandon. It'll suit them. I think they'll try and steer clear of the set piece of the Lions, especially the scrum. They'll want to spin the ball wide, play quick, high-tempo rugby, tap and go. I think it's going to be a little bit too frantic for the Lions, so I'm going to go for the away win in that game, but it should be a close game. I expect both teams to maybe even score 4 tries. So I'm going to go for the Highlanders by about 5. And then, the earlier game that you mentioned as well, bottom of the table Force having a wretched season against the Waratahs team. Even though they're playing in Perth, I fully expect the Waratahs to stretch their lead atop the standings. They're going to be tough to beat in the playoffs. I've got the funny feeling that they're going to be there right at the semi-final, maybe even final stage. Got some really dangerous players, even though they've been a bit hot and cold this season. I think the Waratahs will be far too strong for the Force in Perth en route to South Africa.
Okay. Rob, final game of the weekend, the Stormers versus the Brumbies, both teams coming off disappointing defeats last weekend. I see Brumbies have brought Nick White back at number 9. They're in town this week. We spoke to them earlier this week. They all seem pretty motivated, and I'm sure the Stormers are too.
Yeah, I see that the Brumbies had plenty of nice things to say about the Stormers, which probably tells you that they are aware that they're actually in for a tough gig. This was a really tough one to call. The Brumbies are a quality side. I mean, you look at that team on paper, it's very decent indeed, and they won't be too sort of overawed by facing a potentially sort of 40,000 plus crowd at Newlands if the weather's good, which it is tipped to be. There is tipped to be a bit of wind around, so Newlands it does sort of swirl a bit notoriously at times, and just perhaps that sort of knowledge of the conditions might not be a bad thing for the Stormers.
Particularly with the sort of fly half debate after what happened last weekend. Kurt Coleman leaving 12 points out there, but he's a bit more of a playmaker. I mean, do you think Alistair Coetzee is going to sort of carry on with that sort of different fly half per half?
I think, it's not an ideal situation, as you say. I think it unsettles both players. The thought that, Dimitri Katsoukalis tends to be the one charged with sort of put on the field early and bang over the goals. And then, if the Stormers are in a little bit of trouble or are having to play a little bit of catch-up, then all of a sudden, Alistair Coetzee snaps his fingers and sends on Kurt Coleman, expecting him to sort of suddenly create magic, sometimes out of not very much, because it's not just the fault of the fly halves that the Stormers are struggling for tries. I think there are a few sort of structural inefficiencies, if you like. They're just not playing with the right sort of precision, the Stormers, which is a bit disappointing, because they're a better side than maybe they even realise in certain positions. But I've got a fairly good feeling about the game. I think the Stormers might just be capable of winning it. The Brumbies don't have a fantastic reputation in South Africa. I think that the Stormers might just be able to cash in on that. And there are individuals up front, and especially with that scrum, if they can manage to get more scrums than they got against the Cheetahs, the Stormers will be quite happy, because they'll be hoping to put the shunt on the Brumbies, hoping to apply some pressure. And if they can fix their line out,
I was going to say, that's been a serious
that also will
weak
help.
point.
It has been a terrible weak point, and the Brumbies have got some pretty tall timber in there. They've got several sort of quality jumpers in the mix. So clearly their intention is not only to bank their own ball, but to cause mayhem on the Stormers' throw. And as I say, if there is going to be a bit of a southeaster blowing, which a little bit unseasonal at this time of the year, but apparently there is going to be a bit of southeaster. So that also puts a bit of pressure on the Stormers to make sure that they get their own throw in, on the button.
Yeah.
So a few reservations, but I'm going for Stormers by about 3 points.